just like on a smaller scale in relation to like my relationship with exercise. So I was, as I mentioned, like super sporty and into my fitness pre-bleed. And I think in the beginning I had this, I unfollowed, I mean, I came off Instagram for months whilst I was just, focusing on myself. But when I re-downloaded it, I muted everyone that posted that they were going to the gym. I unfollowed like so many fitness accounts because I was so envious that I couldn't move my body in the way that, quote unquote, normal people could.
This is the Recovery After Stroke podcast with Bill Gassiamis, helping you navigate recovery after stroke.
Hello and welcome to episode 227 of the Recovery After Stroke podcast. To learn more about my guests, including links to their social media and other pages, and to download a full transcript of the entire interview, please go to recoveryafterstroke.com. If you would like to support this podcast, the best way to do that is leave a 5-star review and a few words about what the show means to you on iTunes and Spotify. If you're watching on YouTube, comment below the video, like this episode, and to get notifications of future episodes, subscribe to the show and hit the notifications bell. Now, if you do leave a 5-star review, that's going to increase the ranking of the show on the search engines, and that's going to make it easier for other stroke survivors to find the show, and that's going to help them overcome some of the challenges that they're going through, especially if they are earlier on in their recovery compared to where you might be. And if you remember how good it was for you to come across this podcast and find it, and the relief that you felt, and the ability to get some answers to your questions that it managed to cause for you, then that's exactly what other people are going to feel. And this podcast is about making it easier for other people to recover from stroke, not feel so alone. I would really appreciate it if you did leave me a review, hopefully a 5-star review, and also if you shared the podcast and let people know about it. Now, my guest today is Georgie Henna, who experienced a thunderclap headache and a stroke due to a ruptured AVM aged 22. She has had to learn how to walk again and has a great approach to living with deficits that you must hear. Georgie Henna, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you for having me.
My pleasure. Thanks for being here. Tell me a little bit about what happened to you.
So, for context, I'm 25 years old, live in London, but in May 2020, when I was 22, I completely out of the blue had a brain hemorrhage, which was caused by a ruptured AVM. Had no idea that the AVM was there. This all came out, a few days, well, they kind of suspected it, but it took about 24 hours to actually realise that it was due to an AVM, because the variety of scans, I'm sure, you've done lots of podcasts, and I'm not sure what your cause of stroke was, but with AVMs, obviously the bleed shows up on CT scan and things, but I had to have an angiogram for it to show up the blood vessels, which then showed the AVM. So anyway, completely out of the blue. It was my sister's birthday. It was during the height of the pandemic, and it was towards the end of the day, and I was just going to bed, and then out of nowhere, just had like this massive, what I soon discovered to be called a thunderclap headache, and quickly wanted to rush out of bed to be sick. But then as I went to get out of bed, my left side had gone. This all is like a bit of a blur. Like, I was conscious throughout the whole thing, but obviously I had absolutely no idea what was happening. And I had a few drinks in the daytime. I was pretty much sober when I went to bed. But I think because I'd been drinking in the day, I kind of was like, oh, am I all of a sudden really drunk again? Like, it was very, in a way, I actually think that was a blessing, because I think that kind of softened the whole blow of it. I think I was more like, oh my God, am I just really drunk all of a sudden? Anyway, my boyfriend was with me. He knew that wasn't the case, and I mean, I was being sick everywhere, and like I said, my left side had gone. I was like a rag doll, basically. And my mum came rushing in, and within about 20 minutes, the ambulance had arrived. And yeah, went off to my local hospital. Again, that was all a bit of a blur. I just heard, you know, phrases being like, all the medical terms being thrown around, and it was just all like, what is going on? And a bit of context as well, I had never really been to hospital before, apart from when I was about, I don't know, like 9. I'd broken my arm skiing, so that was ages and ages ago. And so yeah, it was a complete blur, and complete shock to everyone. But in the ambulance, that's when I kind of realized, like, okay, I've had that, the paramedic, there's something about the nature of paramedics. They're just so calming, and every paramedic I've ever met has just been so lovely that I felt really safe. But equally, the things that they were saying, I was like, oh my God, this is really serious. But they said, like, bleed on the brain, and my nanny had actually had a bleed on the brain. She's no longer with us, but she had one about, I don't know, like 12 years ago when I was really young. And that phrase, bleed on the brain, like, I'd never really heard hemorrhage before, or, when I was that young, and stroke. So when I heard them say bleed on the brain in the ambulance, I instantly felt close to my nanny, and it was really comforting. And I was thinking, she didn't die as a result of the bleed. She lived, she only died a couple of years ago. But I just kind of felt like her presence with me, which was really comforting in that moment. So yeah, anyway, there's so much going on, but I then 24 hours later got transferred to another hospital, which is really well known for its neurology department. And it was there that they discovered that it was an AVM, had the angiogram. And then they decided that I didn't need emergency surgery. So they were like toying up between what was the best way of operating, whether it be, like gamma knife surgery or craniotomy. And they decided it'd be craniotomy. So 2 weeks post-stroke, I went into surgery, which that was terrifying. Well, the build-up was, obviously, when you're in there, you just get put to sleep and then you wake up and it's over. I think it was worse for my family and friends. It was like a 7-hour operation or something crazy. So then I spent 5 weeks in hospital, and then was moved to another hospital, which is known for its neuro rehabilitation centre. And I spent 9 weeks there. So I was in hospital for about 3 months in total. And I don't know I did mention that my left side went, but I basically had to relearn to use my left hand, whole left side, walk, arm, everything. So that sort of came back very, very slowly. Up until the operation, I was completely no sensation, no feeling whatsoever. And then I had the operation, and then a few days later, that's when the spasticity started to set in. And then, I'll stop there.
It's all right. I wanted to let you go because basically you just described my experience. I had an AVM, I had brain surgery, I had to learn how to walk again, use my left side again.
I didn't realize you had an AVM. I follow you on Instagram, and I love all your posts and your questions, and everyone interacts with them, but I didn't realize it was an AVM. So wow.
For me, it was at 37. So I've got a question for you though. So in hindsight, I think there was some incidences before my AVM rupture, the first time it bled. I think there was a few incidences that I know now were probably caused by the AVM playing up, or kind of letting me know it was there. Other than the thunderclap headache, do you think now that maybe in the past there was some things that were happening to you that are, oh my gosh, that was probably the AVM playing up?
Well, I have thought about this, and the only thing that I have sort of thought, like, right, that must be it, because the kind of headache was similar but like not intense, was after when I so like occasionally, it wasn't all the time, but only very occasionally, after a really heavy night at uni with friends, I would sometimes wake up with, like, I know headache, everyone experiences headaches,
Mm.
but like to the point where I actually couldn't move my head because, and it wasn't a migraine or anything like that, but like it was in the exact same space where I had the thunderclap headache, and it was just so intense, and it felt like if I moved my head, my whole brain was like gonna bash around my, like, I can't really describe it. And at the time I just thought, oh my god, I've got a really really bad headache, but after paracetamol and some sleep, it went. And then would never sort of, I never struggled with headaches. Like it wasn't one of those, because some people have headaches all the time, they don't really know why. I've never been like that. So I'd say maybe, there's like a few times at uni where I had this really really bad headache after a heavy night. But
A heavy night on the drink, right?
yes, yeah. Yeah.
But your headache was weird in that, like, it was kind of isolated. There was a very weird isolated spot that would kind of make you aware of it.
Yeah, it was different to other headaches, put it that way. Like I knew it, like it's really, I think at the time, it's easy to say now, it probably was to do with the AVM. At the time I just thought it was really really bad dehydration. Would sleep on paracetamol and then it would be gone. So never thought twice about it really. But I can like remember significant moments, particularly like months, that kind of thing, where there'd be the odd day where it would be really bad, but I'd never mentioned it to anyone, because apart from like whoever I was with, it might just be like, oh, I've got a bang head, I've got to go back to bed kind of thing.
Yeah.
But I was never worried about it, because that's headaches
just the
come
day
and
after
go.
a good
Exactly.
session.
Exactly. So but apart from that, I genuinely had no pre-symptoms. Like I've always been really healthy, never really been to the doctors that much. I've been super sporty, like, not to toot my own horn, but like I had sports scholarships all throughout school and college, and loved the gym, played a lot of netball and did athletics and things like that. So yeah, it was just a complete shock.
Fair enough. I've got kids your age. My oldest is 26, my youngest is 22. So you're kind of in the middle there, somewhere there. And your generation, the millennials, have this bad reputation for being, kids that are on social media. They're not in the present time. They've got all these generalizations that you hear about kids that are kind of your age. And a lot of those kids are also described as having a lot of personality issues, a lot of psychological issues, and all that type of thing. I don't see that with you, right? But I'm curious about how this thing that happened to you at 22 for this supposedly snowflake generation. Okay, there's all the labels that you hear get thrown around. How does it impact your emotional and your mental health when one day you're quote unquote normal 22-year-old going to uni, getting smashed with your friends, and doing all the things that everyone does at around that age, and then one day they're still doing that and you're doing this completely different thing, which is like you're kind of fighting for your life. How does it impact you?
Well, a lot. And I feel like there's been different stages, because it's been 2.5 years now, and I feel like recovery, it's an ongoing journey. It will be until however long I live for, and there's definitely been sections to it all so far. And I think in the beginning, I think it was a blessing, and it was really hard as well, but overall I've decided that it was a blessing that it happened during COVID, because it meant that everyone was in lockdown.
Mm.
So when I was in hospital, no one was doing anything. So I didn't initially get that kind of, I mean, everyone was, the longer I was in hospital for, rules were starting to relax. It was summer. I remember my friends going to the beach and things like that and feeling envious that like I was stuck in hospital and, you know, my world had been thrown upside down. But then at the same time, when your life is literally put on the line in front of you, I think it put a lot into perspective for me. And it made me, I don't know, that was sort of like the last thing on my mind. It wasn't until, and I was also in this stage of survival mode for the whole time I was in hospital. And I remember thinking and saying to my family, like, don't get me wrong, there were times where I'd, you know, call my family crying and just miss them so much because I wasn't allowed visitors. But equally, I was handling it really well, to be honest. Everyone was like, are you okay? Like, you are in really good spirits, you're handling it so well. I felt this just huge sense of gratitude. Like it really made me realize how many people care about me and like love me, like the amount of messages and cards and things like that. So I just felt this overwhelming sense of gratitude. And also, like, pre-stroke, a bit of context of, you know, the kind of person that I was pre-stroke but also still am today, is, you know, I love traveling. So I've done a lot of Asia. The summer prior, I'd gone to Bali with my best friend for 3 weeks. You know, I've been scuba diving, love skiing. Like, I've done so many adventurous things, and I was always one to, like, if I be the kind of person that when I started work when I was 15, I'd save up all my money to go away in the summer. And so over the years, you know, that kind of built up, and I just had this huge love for travel. And I think that when I was in hospital, it made me realize, you know, like, right, okay, I don't know what my future looks like. Because at one point I you know, the neurosurgeon didn't think I'd be able to walk again, let alone like move my like hand and things like that. So, you know, at one point I remember having a conversation with my boyfriend about, like, oh my God, what, you know, okay, I might be in a wheelchair forever. And I remember him like just being so great and being like, well, we're talking about, you know, going, like, he's got a camper van, and he's like, well, we can make the camper van like accessible. And like, we were really like planning for that kind of thing, but being quite positive about it all. And I think when you're in that survival mode, obviously everyone has different survival modes, but for me, that's what it looked like. And then it was when I came out of hospital and, you know, the reality of what's happened, moving back home to where I previously was, you know, I was this fully able person. I remember specifically like the first time going down the stairs in my, when I'd left home, I naturally wanted to run down them because that's, you know, what I wanted to do. And when you're in hospital, there really aren't that many stairs because it's just so accessible and easy. And so obviously the good thing about moving home is that it is more challenging. So your brain's being, you know, challenged constantly. And, you know, I found that in hospital, I was distracted by the recovery in the sense that that's where my biggest sort of visible progress was made, was in those first 9 weeks, because I went from being completely paralyzed to then, oh my God, you know, it kind of felt like each day there was something new that I was like, oh my God, like movement.
It's back. Yeah.
Yes. And even the spasticity, like I had no idea what that was. And even when they explained it to me, I think I was a bit naive. And so when I'd yawn, and I don't know if you had this, but like I'd yawn and my arm would like move, and I'd be like, movement. And they'd be like, that's just normal. But I'd be like, I don't care, like my arm's moving. And so any sort of glimmer of movement, I was like, right, like we can work with this. And in rehab, you know, the team of physios, the staff, like the occupational therapists, everyone there was just so supportive. You had this like bunch of cheerleaders around you basically that really believed in you. And I think when you see experts who work with people like yourself and I day in, day out, when you see the hope that they have in you, that makes you believe in yourself. And so, yeah, it's just like recovery. And then you get home and then it's like, oh my God, I'm in this by myself now. And even though I had physio, I think I had a few weeks gap, and then I started physio, and although I was doing it once or twice a week, you know, I went from having this timetable in rehab where I was having like 4 hours of rehab a day, seeing different people working on different things, you know, using different equipment, to then being at home. And I obviously, well, I like didn't have a job at the time. Like my work were really great, and so that pressure was removed. But then I had all these hours in the day, and I felt like when I wasn't doing anything, I felt guilty. I was like, I need to be doing as much as I can to make this recovery better. And then there was definitely this whole stage of, and I feel like in the grand scheme of things, I actually accepted what happened pretty quickly. I feel like, and I think that's what's enabled me to kind of get to where I am today mentally, because I think accepting what happened enabled me to just kind of let go of a lot of things and focus on what I needed to. But we can come to that in a minute. But what I was going to say was, there was definitely a period where I was like, I can't be happy until I'm better. And I think it took a bit of time to realize that, you know, first of all, I didn't actually go and look on Instagram. It took me about a year. I created my journey account when I was in hospital, but I didn't actively go and seek other stroke survivors for about a year, because I think I just like wanted to make my recovery my own. And, you know, no doctor could tell me like what my future was going to look like. So I was like, right, I'm just going to write my own future kind of thing. And I know everyone has different ways of coping, and I met some lovely people in hospital that I was in touch with. But yeah, at the beginning, and I'm a very motivated person and very disciplined, and I think, you know, that has its pros and cons. That's been my biggest strength throughout this recovery journey, but it's also been like my biggest, I don't know if, maybe weakness, or I don't like the word enemy, but sometimes it's been my biggest battle is myself, and how hard I can be on myself, which just, you know, so.
I think there's a really good side to being hard on yourself for the right reasons. If you're being hard on yourself just because you want to give somebody a hard time and it happens to be you, well, and there's no real outcome for it, I think that's really hard to overcome. And that's a cycle that people are, if they get stuck on that, it's destructive, right? But if you're hard on yourself from the point of view of, you know what, I've been sitting down and watching Netflix for 4 hours. What am I doing? Get off your ass and go and do something. And then you do something, and then that something makes you neurologically tired or fatigued or whatever. I think that's good, because what you're doing is you're pushing yourself to get back to neurological fitness and to achieve overcoming all the things that you need to overcome. And it takes time, and you have to push the limits. If you don't push the limits, you don't know where they are, and you don't know how far you've come, and you can't fine tune, you know, your recovery. So I think that kind of being tough on yourself is good. I'm not motivated, but I'm going to get up anyway.
Discipline.
Yeah, that's really good. But other people who hate on themselves by saying you're an idiot, you're stupid, or they hate the fact that they found themselves in a situation and they blame themselves and all that type of thing, it's really, really destructive. And that's not going to help anybody in any part of their recovery at all. I like your approach to the doctors.
If you've had a stroke and you're in recovery, you'll know what a scary and confusing time it can be. You're likely to have a lot of questions going through your mind. Like, how long will it take to recover? Will I actually recover? What things should I avoid in case I make matters worse? Doctors will explain things, but obviously you've never had a stroke before. You probably don't know what questions to ask. If this is you, you may be missing out on doing things that could help speed up your recovery. If you're finding yourself in that situation, stop worrying and head to recoveryafterstroke.com, where you can download a guide that will help you. It's called 7 Questions to Ask Your Doctor About Your Stroke. These 7 questions are the ones Bill wished he'd asked when he was recovering from a stroke. They'll not only help you better understand your condition, they'll help you take a more active role in your recovery. Head to the website now, recoveryafterstroke.com, and download the guide. It's free.
No one's going to tell me what I am and what I'm not going to do, how far I'm going to go and what I'm going to achieve. The fact, I love the fact that you're working at 15. At 15, you're getting schooled by people who really don't give a shit about you, other than they want to make the most money out of you, the 15-year-old who they're paying the least amount of money. You know, they want to make profit off you. So what they're doing is they push you, they train you, they teach you, and they're taking advantage of the fact that you're 15 and they're paying you a small amount of money. And that's forcing you to learn what the world's about. It's forcing you to grow up. It's forcing you to learn the kind of people you want to look up to. It also gives you the opportunity to create boundaries from people that you don't like and people's ideas that are not aligned to yours. And it seems like a trivial thing to get a kid a job at 15, but it's such a massive way to bring kids at 15 from being an adolescent, from being a teenager, to then being to beginning the evolution and the growth and the wisdom that comes with interacting with people a lot.
Definitely.
And it makes you less naive.
For sure. And I remember it was my dad who, we live really close to a pub, and you know, because we live just up the drive from them, we knew the owners quite well. And I remember my dad, as soon as I turned 15, he was like, right, go down there and ask for a job. And I'd obviously, being 15, I was like, oh no, like, you know, or I'd put it off, or I'd call them, they wouldn't answer, and then I'd be like, okay, they didn't answer, and then he'd be like, call them again. And he really pushed me to go and get a job. But do you know what, like, it started off as I just worked like 4 or 5 hours on a Sunday serving roast dinners, and you know, but you just meet so many different people, and it got you out the house. And I really, you know, learned. I really didn't earn that much money, but when you're 15 and, you know, getting 20 quid on the weekend, you know, that's huge. So, you know, I learned the value of money, and obviously at that age you're not paying for any bills or anything like that, and not even really spending money on, you know, anything expensive at all. So I would just save most of it for them the summer. And, you know, at the time I had a friend who had a holiday home, so I'd saved, like, you know, for flights to go there and things like that. So yeah, and then it was kind of like, right, that summer was great, I want next summer to be just as good. So that would keep the momentum going. And yeah, so I have my dad to thank for getting me out the house to go and get a job at 15.
Yeah, it's kind of like independence, right? It starts building that understanding of what independence is about. And then when you end up being at home, surrounded by family, but alone in your recovery, that's when your skills that you learned a few years ago start to come into application. And then you go, okay, I have to drive myself. I have to be self-motivated. I have to use the skills that I did when I was at the pub, because at the pub, if I wasn't self-motivated, the last thing you wanted was somebody telling you 15 times a day, go to the counter, pick up a meal and serve it. You just needed to know that that's what you had to do. So it's kind of like an instinctive thing that you have to develop. That's not really instinct. You have to think about it the first few times, and then later you can apply it to other things in life. I wanted to focus on this part of the conversation because, I mean, it's a weird thing. You're an adult at 22, but it's such a young age to have to go through something so life-changing. And I remember how dumb I was when I was 15, although I worked and did all those things. I still, you know, the gap between 15 and 22, it's not a lot of time to grow a brain and be able to handle dramatic things. Maybe it's different for girls. I don't know if that if that actually applies. But I just love the way you're talking about how you went about your recovery and what you were thinking, and your mindset seemed to be really solidly grounded in this foundation that I think played a massive role in
Yeah.
that.
Yeah, and I think, I never really made the direct correlation between, having a job so early, but I've always been, and I think I'm very similar to my dad in this sense. I've always been get up and get things done in the morning. I'm a planner, I'm organized, I'll get my clothes out the night before, just always been quite routine focused. And I've always, my friends would always tell me anyway, like before all of this, that I'd always be, the friend that would look on the brighter side, or, have that kind of mindset. And I don't think I just magically, had this stroke and then all these qualities appeared. They were actually a part of who I was, but this stroke has enhanced them and actually put them to really good use. And they were being obviously used well throughout going to uni and things like that. But I feel like it's really brought out qualities within me that, have just completely got me to where I am today, which has been, a benefit for sure. But
Stroke will do that.
Yeah, but it's not to say, it brought out those qualities, but then there's obviously the whole topic of, feeling, well, the grief that comes with it as well, and losing parts of your identity as well. And I mean, that's a whole, like, I could speak for hours on that as well, but I feel like that's been a whole journey, and it still is, but equally, I moved out again. Well, I had to move home when I had the stroke. I was living at home anyway because of the pandemic. I was in London before then, moved home, had the stroke, was there for 2 years. And then I actually have moved back out to London only about 7 weeks ago. And I feel like, and I went traveling around Borneo in June with my boyfriend. I've basically just been like, stepping out my comfort zone, as in my stroke comfort zone, and have actually come to realize that parts of me that I thought were dead, or that I thought I no longer had access to, have actually been reignited in situations that, you don't get when you're just sat at home or, in everyday life. And so, obviously I mentioned that I was really into travel. So then when I went abroad, and especially somewhere like Borneo, where it's so stimulating, the culture, the wildlife, the temperature, like there's so much going on. And being with Richard, it was just so freeing, and it made me realize that no matter my physical abilities, which, I mean, I don't see myself as disabled because I feel very able with what I can do, but I still have strong muscle spasticity down my left side, so my arm gets really tense, and I've got a bit of foot drop, so I can't actually lift my foot up and outwards, so I use electrical stimulation, and so I have to be steady, but so despite the physical restrictions, I realized that I can still go to Borneo and I can still experience this new culture and all these amazing things. And it ignited feelings that obviously I hadn't felt in a while because of COVID and because of being stuck at home. And so I was like, oh my gosh, there's parts of me that are still there. And so since then, I've really been just, leaning into stepping out my comfort zone. And it was actually Borneo that made me realize, like, okay, you're way more capable than you realize. Let's move out. And so that was what got the ball rolling. And then it was about 5 weeks before I actually moved out, we found a place. And then since I've moved to London and just been living independently again, well, for the first time since the stroke, it's just, again, it feels right. It feels normal. There's still things I have to think about. There's still, rehab that I do. And it's just adapting. And I feel like there's, been parts of me that have been reignited. And I'm like, I just feel like I've got this new lease of life again, which is really promising. And I feel like, that's kind of the message I'm trying to put out there on my Instagram, and what I help other people with is, whatever. I think there's, we're not the same person that we were pre-stroke.
No.
We're not. And that's okay. And it's
Mhm.
coming to terms with what's happened, but also realizing that, and I know everyone's situation is very different, and I'm speaking on behalf like of my own situation, but I also see it within other people as well. It's coming to accept and then adapting where necessary, but realizing that, you know, there are still parts of the old you that you can access and reignite. And the ones that you can't, that's because you've grown out of that and it's time to like step into the new
That's it.
you. Right? And
Yep.
so making that connection, and it's been like a, you know, a journey, like it's ongoing and it still is. And don't get me wrong, you know, it was only a few months ago where I had a whole, you know, period of grieving again, which really took me by surprise. So I was like, oh, I haven't felt like this in ages. But at the moment, I'm feeling really, really comfortable in my own skin and just kind of, yeah, feeling really good. And it's all been through stepping out my comfort zone and reigniting parts of me that I thought were long gone. So
Is the comfort zone surrounded by fear when you're there? It sounds like it's, you know, they say the comfort zone, it sounds so warm and fuzzy and cuddly and all that, but it's not really. It's actually, I feel like if I'm in my comfort zone, I'm overthinking the next step. I'm fearing what's out there. I am anxious about what's out there. The comfort zone is not comfortable at all. It's so freaking uncomfortable. And the release from all of that anxiety and fear and concern and overthinking happens when I cross the threshold, you know. And that's kind of like, oh, I look back and go, oh, actually that wasn't that bad. No, I overthought that. Or why did I take so long? And oh my gosh, I've learned something new. What you said about identity is people put their identity to rest. Like they completely, totally put it to rest when they've had a stroke, because they've got a new thing that they have to grapple with, and they've got to merge it into their quote unquote old identity, which is not their old identity. It's just still their identity.
exactly, yes.
But they also take a short-term view, and they see that pause that's happened right now as being forever, and there's no light at the end of the tunnel. And it's not true, right? So I'll give you a classic example. My dad's been really healthy his entire life, and he still is. He's 80 next month. And he's got some, you know, usual health issues, you know, at 80, the standard stuff. And he had knee surgery probably about 7 years ago. And he was off his feet because he had to recover and rest his leg just for that 3-6 month period, because he had a new knee. And he couldn't come to terms with the fact that now it was time for sitting down, resting, and not doing all the things that he always did. But that drove him nuts. And he felt really, and you could see his mental health really declined rapidly, just simply because of this time of rest and recuperation, so that when his knee is better, he can be back to normal.
Yeah.
But trying to bring him out of that kind of funk and out of that headspace was really hard. He used to get really emotional and upset about it, and he thought he'd never walk again, when every other person who's ever had a knee surgery like his has walked again. And it was really difficult to kind of shift. But he had such a long time of experiencing his body in a certain way that this new thing he couldn't come to terms with. And he couldn't say to himself, I'm a granddad, I pick up kids from school, I do these tasks for my wife and for my sons and for whatever, and I rest and recuperate when it's necessary.
No, it's so true. And I think it's so complex, and I think people do it subconsciously without even realizing that they're, but like I specifically
Labeling
remember
themselves.
yeah, I specifically remember looking at pictures and videos of me pre-bleed, and there would always be this like pre-bleed, post-bleed me. But now I actually see myself as just this continual, like I'm still the same me. I feel like that separation is actually, there's no separation anymore. I just see it as different stages of my life, and it's so freeing to get to that realization, because before I'd look at videos and photos of me pre-bleed and I would feel so detached from it that I would feel like I'm actually looking at a completely different person. And that was what was really upsetting, because you just want to like click your fingers and go back to that time. But then, you know, as time goes on, and again, as much as you have to do your own self-work and things like that, time does also play a massive part in it, because over time you experience more things, you're exposed to more things, which slowly, by, you know, piece by piece, help you rebuild. And like, you know, there's so much to it, but it helps you sort of get to where you are today. But I feel like, as I've mentioned, that over the last, I'd say even probably this year in particular, because COVID's not as prominent, you know, society's got more freedom now anyway. You know, I've been abroad again since, which sort of reignited that spark of travel, which, by the way, I was super anxious about beforehand. And going back to that comfort zone thing, yeah, I think when something to do with your health happens to you, you know, there's no one can tell you, like, no one can calm you down when you're feeling anxious about your health, because your health, like, you know, someone can say, oh, the chances are so small. I'd be like, yeah, but the chances of a 22-year-old having a ruptured AVM is so small. And it happened to me. So of course I'm going to worry about X, Y, Z. But, you know, so I've just gone off on a complete tangent.
No,
but I think what I was trying to say was this separation between like pre-stroke, post-stroke. I think, yeah, it takes a lot of coming to terms with, but the more you can put yourself out there, the more you can continually step out your comfort zone, the more you'll realize you're capable, which will then, you know, make you want to keep going and going out your comfort zone. And then before you know it, you are doing things and experiencing things that you would have pre-stroke. I think some people write off completely, and they think they'll never be able to enjoy anything again, because they're now in this box. And it's like, you know, obviously everyone has different relationship with labels, but for me, having a stroke is just something that's happened to me, and it's a part of, you know, this big
your journey.
Like, yeah, exactly. And yeah, so it's a crazy ride. And I think the longer it's scary to let go of, you know, pre-bleed and like that sort of, for me, obviously I was so young, so I had a really smooth upbringing, and you know, great friends and great relationships and things like that. So I really did have a smooth ride up until I had the stroke. And so I was clinging on to that for a while, but I think I quite quickly realized to let go of that, because that was causing me more pain, and that was stopping me from enjoying life for what it was and being present and all those things. So yeah, it's
stroke
been
can and close doors. Stroke closes doors, right? 100%. There's no doubt about it. But it also can open doors.
100%.
And for me, I mean, and I get people who are listening and going, well, but your stroke's not like mine, or you're not as bad as me, or all those things. Well, I've been going through this for 10 years, and I could have had mental health issues. I could have had emotional issues. I could have had all sorts of issues about fear and not overcoming that, not facing my fear. I could have, but I went and got the help I needed. I went and got emotional support. I went and got counseling, and I still go to counseling. And I still speak to people who support me emotionally properly, not people who don't understand what emotional support really means and is, right? I'm talking about people who can guide me through my emotional turmoil as well as my mental health turmoil, right? So for me, it's opened the door of this podcast that never ever would have existed if I didn't have a stroke. Never ever. I would not have in a million years thought that what I should do in my life is find a topic and start a podcast about it.
Yeah.
I didn't feel like I had experience in anything that I was qualified to talk about.
Mhm.
And I never thought I would. So I did it. I didn't do it until I now am qualified to talk about my experience with something that is really dramatic, that makes a real difference when other people hear me talk about it. And as a result of that, it allows me to then also close a gap that I felt that it existed when I left hospital, when I went home, which was, why the hell is nobody talking about this?
Yeah.
How is it that I don't know other people who have had a stroke and how they're overcoming that and what they've learned from it and how they've grown and evolved their identity from it? And it's, for me, this is a ridiculous idea that I had to go through something so dramatic to get to this side.
Mhm.
And this side is all pushing through all of those barriers of, I'm going to speak about stroke. What are people going to think of what I've got to say? And
Mhm.
oh my gosh, they're going to harshly judge me and they're going to, who knows what. And that, I paused the podcast for a little while because I was afraid to record new episodes. I was
Mhm.
afraid to get rejected from people who I reached out to be on the podcast. And it's like,
Mhm.
how weird is that? Why would I be afraid for somebody to say no to a podcast? It's not a date. I'm not asking somebody to, I'm not 14 and asking the girl that I am in love with to come on a date with
Mhm.
me. And if she says yes, I'll be heartbroken for the rest of my life. It's a podcast. It's a conversation. We get to learn and we get to therefore help each other and then help other people who are listening and learning from us. And that stroke opened up all those possibilities for me. And I don't know what your problem is and how bad your stroke is and what it's caused for you. But if you just get curious about what doors can be opened and you open them and just peek through them at the beginning, not even go there, just open it a little bit and just have a cheeky look in, you might be amazed at what it can do. And it sounds like for you, going and having that first trip after stroke, which was really hard for me too, because my wife, in her amazingness, decided that our first trip was going to be the other side of the planet, Melbourne to New York, and we
Yeah.
had to travel for almost a day to get there. And I
Mhm.
felt like if I'm traveling a day to be away from my hospital and my doctors and all that kind of stuff,
Mhm.
and I'm in this other country where I don't know anybody, and something happens to me,
Mm.
what the hell? Like, it's going to be terrible. What am I going to do? How am I going to manage
Mhm.
that? How are we going to keep me healthy and well and alive? The last thing I want to do is die overseas, you know?
Yeah.
But that can happen to a normal person. You can get hit by
Yeah.
lightning overseas anyway.
Exactly. And that was exactly the thing with me. I mean, when we booked the trip, we were originally going to Sri Lanka, but then literally a week before we were due to fly, see, there's been a huge economic crisis over there, and the government had actually advised not to travel there. And we had, booked this for a while, and we really still wanted to do a big trip and go sort of Asia way. And we looked at like cheapest flights, and flights at the moment are just crazy everywhere. But Kuala Lumpur was, our sort of like next best thing. And my boyfriend's got family in Borneo, so that's why we chose to go there. Obviously, that is far from the UK. And I haven't mentioned this yet, but about 9 months after surgery, I actually started getting focal seizures. And so, I mean, that for me was actually more traumatic than the whole stroke itself. And that is something that I think has caused biggest anxieties around my health, because I feel like with the AVM, I've seen on scans that it's been physically removed, and I've had that confirmation that it's gone. Whereas with seizures, obviously, they're unpredictable. And so, touch wood, I've only had two, and since I've been on tablet, like medication, I haven't had any. But going to Borneo, which was 8 hours time difference, and I'm taking this medication at set times, morning and night, there was that whole anxiety as well, like, got to make sure that I adjust my timings before I go and this, that, and the other. But I realized that it's going to be the first time you do anything, especially that big, is going to be scary. And if you don't do it, then, you know, you stay in, your world just stays so small. But like you said, you've got to lean into these things because you don't know what's out there. You don't know what, when you open one door, like more doors open. So for me, obviously going to Borneo, and then it opened the whole new door of like moving out, and, you know, that's opened a whole chain of doors. But also, I've just lost my train of thought. But yeah, stepping out your comfort zone, and the worries and managing with it. But that's one thing that I kept telling myself was, right, you're not the only person in the world with a health condition. You're definitely not the only person in the world that has to take medication, that travels. Like, the doctors have said you can travel. So, you know, and I just did everything I could to prepare. So I spoke to like an epilepsy clinic, got their advice on, you know, adjusting my timings of medication. You know, they were super chilled about it on the phone. So I was like, oh, okay, this is, you know, not that bad. I printed out every document that I needed to just in case. And, you know, it was fine. Like the actual, I wrote about this in my blog actually, because I wrote about my travels, but I remember getting on the plane and just being so, as soon as we were in the air and I realized that my head wasn't going to explode, because that was another just like catastrophic anxiety. I was like, oh, is my head going to be okay, like going up in the air? But as soon as we were up in the air, I was so excited, and I felt like I was literally living the metaphor of, it's not even about the destination, it's about the journey.
Beautiful.
Yeah, because and it sounds really cringy, but just the whole, I'm on a plane, like, and also forgot to mention, we just so happened to fly on the 2-year, was it 2-year? Yeah, 2-year anniversary of my stroke. So that was a coincidence. And yeah, so I was in the air and I was like, oh my God, 2 years ago, you know, my whole world was flipped upside down. And today I'm getting on a plane and going across the world, you know, and I was able to go snorkeling and, you know, obviously take precautions. And don't get me wrong, maneuvering on the boat and getting on and off the boat was not pretty or elegant, but I was like, I'm going to make this work. And, you know, I got to experience some amazing things. And I think, yeah, you've just got to trust yourself, because you're always more capable than you think.
Yeah. I think people notice, people who are physically able notice disability more when somebody is not confident, like you said, in their own skin, and has, you know, trepidation about being exposed on, for example, in your perfect situation, like on a boat, where your physical limitations make it a little more, what's the word? Like, you got to take a different approach to getting your gear on, getting in the water, and then getting out of the water. It's kind of different. But I think when you're the person that's overthinking that and concerned about that, I think you make disability more visible to other people. And I'm not saying you shouldn't be cautious, but I feel like there's a mindset to that as well. I feel like how you hold yourself and express yourself and think about yourself and talk about yourself, even though your body's different than what it was before stroke, makes it, I'm not sure is the word, more, or allows the person to make it more awkward for themselves, you know, in that situation. And I say that because one of my favorite, and I love everyone who I've had on my podcast, okay? So please, nobody take it the wrong way. But one of my favorite episodes was way at the beginning, like very, very early. It was episode 47 with Maggie Whittam. And Maggie was an actor, and I think a model, and she had an AVM, and it bled when she was 33, and it impacted her one side of her body really dramatically. And She went through all the hell that we all went through, all the emotional, all the mental anguish, all that stuff. And she has probably pain and suffering from spasticity and all the stuff that we hear about that's common. But in her identity was this real desire to be an actor, to still do the stuff that she always did. And she found near where she lives the most amazing organization. It's called the Family Theater, PHAMALAY. I think it's in California somewhere. Might even be in Los Angeles, somewhere there. That put on productions, and all the people are people who are somehow physically disabled. And she's done a documentary, and she's done all these things that are related to how now she sees, how she experiences the world. And even though, if you listen to the episode, you know, she'll explain the difficulties and the challenges and all the problems and all the stuff. Even then, she still goes about participating in life fully. And that is what I'm kind of saying. Like, and that makes it so much better when you have to deal with all the physical limitations of what a stroke has done to you. And it's not easy for her to physically participate in those types of things and in life to that extent. It probably was easier physically, but within her, there's this innate need to continue to do that. And she's just found a way to do it. And I had the pleasure of viewing her documentary before it was released. And I'm not sure if it's actually released yet, like properly. And she asked me to review it and tell her what I thought about it. And it was so amazing to see that. And it's such an important message that needs to be said. And it can't be said by a quote unquote able-bodied person. No. Before stroke, I could not represent this community. I had no way of doing that. And now we can. So she's doing amazing work, really important work, and she's living life fully. And she has a desire to help other people. And that helping other people has kind of made projects that should be impossible for her possible. And that's doors that opened for her, but other ones were closed. Her career in the able-bodied acting world has ended, but she shifted it.
Yeah, I feel like, you know, you've just got to be able to get over the idea that, for me, I've realized, as soon as I realized that I can still do things, but okay, they might not be how I like pre-stroke envisioned, but I'm still able to do them. But my body, you know, there might be different like limitations in my body and things, but it's letting go of the idea of like doing things perfectly and, you know, and enjoying them for what they are. And just like on a smaller scale in relation to like my relationship with exercise. So I was, as I mentioned, like super sporty and into my fitness pre-bleed. And I think in the beginning I had this, I unfollowed, I mean, I came off Instagram for months whilst I was just, you know, focusing on myself. But when I re-downloaded it, I muted everyone that posted that they were going to the gym. I unfollowed like so many fitness accounts because I was so envious that I couldn't move my body in the way that, you know, quote unquote normal people could. But then I kind of had this realization because I decided one day to just put on a HIIT workout and just kind of give it my all. I had to make adaptations. I couldn't do the exercises properly, but you know, the music was going, I was just getting my heart rate up, and you know, my left arm was trying to get involved in it, and it probably looked hilarious if no one was watching, thankfully. But I then realized that I could get this same physical, biological reaction from just moving my body vigorously. Like, no matter what it looks like, I can still get the same physical effects that pre-bleed Georgie could have got. And I realized that I then shifted my whole focus on, you know, obviously I've still got goals and things within my recovery, but when I do exercise, I think about moving to feel good rather than to look good or whatever, you know, because there's a whole societal, you know, I think a lot of people have a bad relationship with exercise and stuff anyway, but I think, yeah, focusing on how it makes you feel really removes that sort of awkwardness and lack of confidence in how, you know, the way my body moves now. And since I moved to London, I've joined a gym, and, you know, I think if I'd have let my fear of how my body moves, well, I wouldn't be at a gym if I'd have let that fear completely take over. And going to the gym is part of my weekly routine. I see people, I'm, you know, and so I think, again, that's something that breaking through that fear. And also, yes, it's going to be scary going to the gym. Everyone, to be honest, before I'd even had a stroke, if I was joining a new gym, I'd feel scared, because you go there and, you know, you don't know where the equipment is and things like that. So yeah, I think definitely that lady sounds super inspirational, and I can completely resonate with her mindset and how she's doing things, because I think I've just always thought, you know, there's no one, and I think this is where denial can come in handy at the beginning, because I was in a bit of denial at the start. I was like, right, you know, recovery, like, it's only going to take a few months, then I'll be back to normal. And yeah, but I was like, I'm going to write my own story, and yeah, and it's just opened doors, and here we are today. So
Yeah, I love the gym thing, because self-doubt at a gym, I mean, that happens to most people, especially when you've got the, you know, the meathead in the mirror, you know, doing these ones and, you know, looking amazing and whatever. And then you realize, in order for me to be like that, I've got to put in 7 hours a day, 7 days a week. And I'm like, stuff that, I'm not doing that. I can't be doing that. I'm doing it to gain, for me, if I go to the gym, I'm doing it to gain strength.
yeah,
That's it. It's just muscle strength, and everything else that comes with it is a bonus, right? So I don't enjoy going to the gym like I used to either, because my left side is weaker. So I feel uncomfortable, especially if I'm doing dumbbell, well, no, bench press or dumbbell presses, right? And it's like my left side doesn't want to hold the weight there, but my right side's going, well, come on, let's go again. And the left side's going, stop, you idiot, stop. So it's really I understand, like, there's a lot going on when you go back to the gym. Safety is an issue. If you compare yourself to other people, that's going to be an issue. But if you change the reason why you go, because exercise is really important for a healthy brain and a healthy body, and to keep everything flowing and working in your system. If you change the reason, then you stop comparing yourself and stop looking and stop trying to achieve something that's always been unachievable for you, because you're not prepared to do the work anyway. And you get out of that kind of negative application, I suppose, of the gym, and you start doing the gym for what its purpose is to keep people healthy and physically strong.
I think even, you know, I before I'd had the bleed, I'd kind of got bored of the gym anyway, and I was running a bit more. And I had to remind myself, you know, before you had the bleed, like, you weren't even interested in the gym anyway. And I think when the choice is taken away from you, and I've only just started going back to the gym because the last couple of years I've been really working on my fine-tune movement to make sure that, you know, form, because obviously there's no point going to the gym and trying to build your strength if you're doing it completely wrong.
Yeah.
And so, I mean, patience is something that I had to really work on as well. But I'm now at a place where I've got a gym program. It's been approved by my physio and stuff. And, you know, again, I've had to kind of like put my ego to one side and get over the fact that, you know, I'm not lifting as heavy, nowhere near as heavy as what I used to. But again, going for what it makes me feel. And also, when you actually remove like the weights and things like that, at the end of the day, I'm doing what everyone else going to the gym is doing. I'm going with a bit of a program, going there to feel good, to move my body, and leave it. That's what everyone else is there to do. It doesn't matter, you know, everyone in the gym is focusing on themselves anyway, because everyone in there is, you know, regardless of, you know, what you look like or how strong you are, everyone is only focused on themselves. And so when you start thinking like that, that can, you know, work wonders. And like I said, the first few times it feels a bit scary and daunting, but, you know, I've been going there for a couple months now, and yeah, I just, you know, if anyone looks at me funny, or to be honest, they might not even, it's just your interpretation. I think a lot of the time, how you think people think of you is actually just a projection of how you feel about yourself. So yeah, but no, it's been good.
One of the other awesome people I've had on the podcast is Kelly Studebaker. She was on episode 106, and she's a power lifter, but she has is it her left side or her right side? I think she has right side spasticity, and she's very much unable to lift weights with her right side of her body. Her arm is very tense, her fist is clenched, and her walk is affected, right? So she can't do the regular stuff, but she's a one-sided power lifter. Her left side is jacked, it's like huge, and her right side is not, and it's a completely different physique on each side of her body. And she has been recovering from a ruptured AVM from the age of 11.
Wow.
Right? And she's just gone, stuff it, I'm going to become a power lifter. And she also knits scarves and
Really?
and
knitting's really good for the brain.
yeah, and hats and stuff like that. So you kind of, there are people out there that are doing this, and you're not alone. You're not just the only person on the planet that's going through this. And if you search, you'll seek them out, you'll find them, and they'll teach you. They can, and so many people that have been through what we've been through want to help, and they'll teach you how they got over their issues, or how they overcome those challenges. But to see, like, I can't imagine powerlifting ever in my life, not before stroke, not after stroke. And then to see somebody doing it the way that Kelly does it, it's so cool. It's impressive, even, like, it's just impressive, just full stop, and forget about all the other stuff. But then when I think about, you know, my deficits, then it's even more impressive. Like, it's super impressive. I love it. And it's one of those things that I'm certain people told us she wouldn't be able to do.
Well, and do you know what? That's the biggest, I think a lot of people, I've spoken to stroke survivors who have been told by health professionals, you know, that you'll never be normal again, or whatever phrase, you know. And I think sometimes they can forget that they're speaking to, they don't realize how much influence they have on someone's belief, especially in the early stages. And as I mentioned, I felt fortunate that the physios that I was surrounded by, like, they believed in me when I didn't believe in myself, which then fueled, you know, the whole thing. And my physio, since I've been out of hospital, my God, she's had me doing things that I genuinely, like, laughed at her. I laughed in her face when she told me to start running. I couldn't even walk properly yet. And she was like, right, we're going running today. And I literally was like, are you joking me? But because she believed in me, I mean, I was terrified, but because she believed in me, I was like, right, okay, I'm so scared, but, like, I'm going to do this because, you know. And again, that's just helped my recovery so much, because, you know, I can't necessarily run properly, but it's, you know, gets you don't know the science behind it, but it gets your neurons and, like, taps into those more sort of, like, rhythmic natural patterns which are stored in our central nervous system, I think, as opposed to our actual, like, cognitive thinking. And anyway,
it increases your dopamine levels, it increases your endorphins, it increases all the positive things that you know and hear about what makes you happy and what makes you feel alive and what makes all your organs work and what makes you have a good night's sleep and what gets your digestive system going. Like, it impacts you in so many positive ways. It's just ridiculous. And there's so much written about it. It's so important for brain health. It's the most important thing. It doesn't matter how physical you are. You could just be somebody that's fresh out of stroke in a wheelchair. You can only move one side on your body. And what you're doing is you're in your wheelchair and you've attached and you'll grab the pole with your other hand, and you're just pushing and pulling yourself away to and from that pole. And whatever way the wheelchair rolls, you're just resisting and pushing and pulling forward and backwards. And that's it. That is supporting lung function, heart function, the kidneys, the liver, everything in your body, as well as your mental health and your emotional health. So, I mean, it's a no-brainer. It needs to be something that we focus on, and it's so useful and beneficial at small levels that there is no excuse for anybody. Everybody can do it. And there you go. I've just hopefully opened some doors for people that they thought wasn't possible, because they don't see pushing and pulling yourself on a pole in your wheelchair. They don't see it as being exercise, but it definitely is.
For sure. And just to kind of like on that point, and I feel like it's been a common theme, with stepping out your comfort zone and things. But one thing I've come to realize is that the biggest limitations are the ones that I put on myself, not my physical limitations. And I think it can be easy to blame, my left side can't move anymore, or for me it's been my left side, my foot can't move and things like that, and the spasticity and seizures and all this worry. And I think naturally, we've had a stroke, so we put ourselves into this box of, we've had a stroke, I'm disabled. I really don't like that word, because I do think that dis being in brackets, because it's like, what is it? Like, everyone's able to a degree, and I feel like it's dropping that expectation of what it looks like when you're doing something, and being open-minded, being curious, like you said, because where there is a will, there is a way. And if you're going to be pedantic about it and be like, well, I can't run exactly how I used to, then obviously that is fact and that is the truth. But equally, that holding on to that is just stopping you from enjoying so much. There's so much out there for people to still enjoy. Even if, like, I feel like I've gained so much since the AVM rupture, even though I've ironically lost mobility. And it's and I mean, part of the work I do is helping people to thrive again after stroke, and help with their mindset and things like that, because, and I'm aware that everyone has different upbringings and is exposed to different things, and some people aren't even aware that there is this alternative way of thinking. And when you're able to be more curious and open-minded and stop comparing yourselves to others, it's really liberating.
I 100% completely agree. I love the wisdom in your young years, in your 25 years. It sounds like you're kind of a old soul anyway, and quite wise, even though you hadn't gone through the stroke yet. But now it sounds like, you're somebody that I think you're setting a great example, and people can learn from your recovery, all people of all ages, right? And I really appreciate that. I really appreciate that there are younger people like you who are doing this type of stuff at your age, because there's a lot of other younger people having strokes that may not relate to an older bloke like me. And even though I've been through similar things that they've been through, they might be going, well, who is this old bloke from Melbourne that I don't know or can relate to or see themselves relating to? So it's really good and it's really important. And I'm wondering, here's something that I'm going to throw out there, see whether this little seed germinates. And I wonder when the book's going to be written.
Oh my gosh, so many people have said that to me. I definitely, it is on the agenda,
Yeah,
but I feel I'm like collecting the chapters at the
I love it.
moment.
Love it.
And, you know, I think I'll know when the time is right. I think, yeah, I've got a blog and I'm not as active on it as I used to be, but I do keep record of things that are going, you know, so who knows, some point in the future, hopefully.
Georgie, thanks so much for being on the podcast. I really appreciate it.
Thank you so much for having me. It's been a pleasure to be here.
Thanks for joining us on today's episode. Sharing the show with family and friends on social media will make it possible for people who may need this type of content to find it easier, and that may make a massive difference to someone that is on the road to recovery after their own experience with stroke. If you are a stroke survivor with a story to share about your own experience, come and join me on the show. The interviews are not scripted. You do not have to plan for them. All you need to do to qualify is be a stroke survivor or care for someone who is a stroke survivor, or be one of those fabulous people that help stroke survivors overcome deficits and get better. So basically, you just have to be involved in stroke some way, shape, or form to get on the show. If you go to recoveryafterstroke.com/contact, you can fill out the form, and as soon as I receive it, I will respond with more details on how you can choose a time that works for you and me to meet over Zoom. Now, thanks again for being here and listening. I really appreciate you, and see you on the next episode.
Importantly, we present many podcasts designed to give you an insight and understanding into the experiences of other individuals. Opinions and treatment protocols discussed during any podcast are the individual's own experience, and we do not necessarily share the same opinion, nor do we recommend any treatment protocol discussed. All content on this website and any linked blog, podcast, or video material controlled this website or content is created and produced for informational purposes only and is largely based on the personal experience of Bill Gassiamis. The content is intended to complement your medical treatment and support healing. It is not intended to be a substitute for professional medical advice and should not be relied on as health advice. The information is general and may not be suitable for your personal injuries, circumstances, or health objectives. Do not use our content as a standalone resource to diagnose, treat, cure, or prevent any disease for therapeutic purposes or as a substitute for the advice of a health professional. Never delay seeking advice or disregard the advice of a medical professional, your doctor, or your rehabilitation program based on our content. If you have any questions or concerns about your health or medical condition, please seek guidance from a doctor or other medical professional. If you are experiencing a health emergency or think you might be, call 000 if in Australia, or your local emergency number immediately for emergency assistance, or go to the nearest hospital emergency department. Medical information changes constantly. While we aim to provide current, quality information in our content, we do not provide any guarantees and assume no legal liability or responsibility for the accuracy, currency, or completeness of the content. If you choose to rely on any information within our content, you do so solely at your own risk. We are careful with links we provide. However, third-party links from our website are followed at your own risk, and we are not responsible for any information you find there.